Okay, so let's take a look at how you can create your own cluster and database inside Azure Data Explorer. To find Data Explorer, you can use your search bar Azure Data Explorer. Right here you will find it with name Azure Data Explorer Clusters. You can also find it through service. Right, so create a service would lead to the same page if you click on that. Here we can click on creating a new cluster and also the database. Then there is dedicated page to handle Azure Data Explorer, where you can see dataexplorer.azure.com. This is where you will find page like this, but you will have to sign in with your Azure credential to manipulate the rest. So we will go here later. Right, meanwhile let's take a look at option 2, create the cluster. So we click on create. So in next page it will allow us to go through the configuration. Now here you see you have free trial subscription, then resource group, then for cluster I'm going to name my DB XP. Right, so this is my cluster name and I will choose the region. Let's see if we have East US. So East US is one option, right? And alternatively there should be local option, but I don't see that. So I will stick with the default. Then there is workload option. So I will choose dev and test because this is just a test, just to show you that I can create the cluster and database. So I'm just testing this out for you. Right. Meanwhile, there is option for storage and compute optimized. So if you are working with real and serious data for business, pick one of these two based on your context. I will choose dev and test and it will limit me to 2 cores and dev no SLA option. There is also other selection options, but let's go with the minimum default. Now let's go for scale, where it allows you to choose between manual scale and optimized scale. So I'm going with one instance of manual scale. Then goes for configuration in another tab, where you can see streaming ingestion, which you can turn off, and auto stop cluster. So these are some of the options that you have. Click on security, where you can set some of these things, and you can also check for identity option. So I'm going with system assign identity and tenant permissions to my own tenant only. Next comes networking, where I have public endpoints. Then comes diagnostic setting, which I can turn on and off. Then comes tags option, which I can enable, disable. Finally, review and create options. So here validation will happen for our Data Explorer cluster. Right, now once we validate this and we go through all the options to see whether everything is according to our configuration choice. So once that applies, we are good to go for creating the Azure Data Explorer cluster. So let's create, so that instance will start. So here you see the cluster option that you have, and it should go for deployment. Once it goes to deployment, we can go for system resources and its own dashboard, where we will manipulate things like creating our database, adding sample data, and then proceed with other options. Okay, as you can see, the resource is created. I will click on that. Now here, as you can see, every time we start and stop the resource, it will take equal amount of time to bring things up. Now here you can see your Data Explorer wants you to create at least one database, right? Then we can add a test database on the top of that. So our job here was to create the cluster and then go for database creation, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first show you all the options that we have, then we will finally go for creating database here. So as you can see, this is the dashboard where you can see my subscription ID, compute specifications, then two things. This is the URI for my data explorer, and I can access my instance through this particular page. Right now, clicking on that would lead to a URL where I am already connected, and it will show me what are some of the things that are available for me. Considering I already created cluster, so here it is expecting me to create a database, otherwise it will continue to throw error as there will be nothing to go for. So here, this is the home page. So here we will be dealing with things like our database and so on. Right, so for now we will skip this part, but we will complete our dashboard. So this URL was for Explorer. Next is for data ingestion, where we are actually going to add some data. Right now, here within data tab we see databases and query. First we will create database here at the end, and then once database is created and data is added, we can run query on that database. Right, and there will be query editor just like we have seen here, and you can see same query editor. Then within settings we have scale up, scale out option for the same settings that we had at the time of creating our own instance of Data Explorer. Then comes scale out. As you can see, currently nothing is there because we are on manual scaling. Then comes configuration. We can turn off on based on what we want to do. Here let's say I want to add R language and Python language extension. I can simply turn on and save. Right, and then here you see security and networking option where I can change the permissions and add things specific for database admin, viewer and monitor. Right, now these are some of the things you can explore within security and networking part. There is also monitoring part which you can explore, and finally automation. Right, so I will just stick with databases for now, considering we want to create database. So click on data, then database. Alternatively go to overview, where we also have option to create database here or from database creation here. So I will choose databases, then click on add database. Here you see database name, retention period. So I will change this to, let's say, 7 days. Let's change cache in days, 7 days. Now let's see, it is expecting me to add database name. So my DEXP. Right, so my DBXP again for database as well. So my cluster and database name is same. Let's create it. So it will take a bit of time and it will give us the database. Then we will take a look at queries on empty database, obviously. So just click on that. Now here it will open the database view where you can see Cosmos DB preview, event, IoT, event grid. Now here we will run the query, and we can load here for, let's see, show databases. If we run this, let's see what happens. Everything will be empty, right? Considering we only have one database on the top of which we have run this query. So similarly, if we try and run show tables, nothing will come up. So if we go for show tables and run, nothing is there, as you can see. So we managed to do the operation required in our Azure Data Explorer cluster. We created a database and we also ran one query. Now we will take a look at another part where we are going to use Azure Data Explorer to ingest some data. Like, let's say I have like CSV file which I use to ingest data into Azure, and we are going to manipulate our database there. So for now we reached our goal of creating the cluster and creating database in Azure Data Explorer.